So this lecture will be on social media in organizations. So what we'll be doing today, well, it says social media and knowledge management, but I also said so in the course manual, but I don't have time to talk about knowledge management in this lecture. So it's not part of the lecture or the course. So today we'll focus on social media, and I want to explain a bit about customer relationship management systems. And next week we have the last lecture. So next week I will explain a bit more about these. So I'll give you the answers to the database assignment. I will explain one last topic about implementation in organizations, and I will tell something more about the exam. But I also want to give you a heads up now about the exam. So you may have noticed already, but I uploaded, I made 2 discussion pages on Canvas, in which I explain a bit about the workings of the exam. So the cover page and information about the proctored exam. So as you don't know for sure, but if you don't know, then you know now. So the exam will be a proctored exam. For those of you who haven't had a proctored exam yet, it will mean that you do your exam from home while you're not being watched with the help of a specific computer program, Proctorio. And that computer program takes into account what you're doing and if you're paying attention. And so you have to make so that you make the exam without for possible fraud. Sounds worse than it is. And for those of you who did communication theory with me last year, there was a lot of discussion about the use of Proctorio, but in the end there were no problems at all and no indications of fraud or whatever. So I created a page with information about the proctor's exam with links to everything you need to know about how proctoring works, with general information about the exam, explanation why it is a proctored exam, and the steps, and an FAQ with the most relevant information about doing the exam via Proctorio. So for those of you with communication theory, it's basically the same as before. So I just translated the FAQ in English. So most important is that you don't have to have a certain operating system, but you need to use Chrome. The demands for the technology are pretty low, so even if you have an old laptop, it generally works. So you have to read through the pages about what will happen exactly, but indications of fraud are when your webcam sees another pair of eyes. So when someone else enters the room, or when you have a poster above your bed of a boy band, or when you have a television screen which is on, which your webcam can see, then those may be indications of fraud. So make sure to remove all boy band posters now. But just make sure that no one enters the room and then there are no other screens on when you take the exam. So how it works is that there is an algorithm who takes into account all the information that is processed. And once it hits a certain threshold, then that may be an indication of fraud. If that is so, then there are a couple of people in the university who can review the data. So they've reviewed the data and they can see what happened. So even if your father or mother suddenly enters the room, nothing will happen. But like I said, in my last exam was also proctored, nothing happened. There were no indications of fraud at all. Construction noises are not flagged as fraud. It's only when they hear talking. If you have objections to Proctorio, or if you are not able to take the exam from home due to your circumstances at home, your internet connection is not a safe situation at home, you can request to take the exam on campus. I do have to make a written exam, so you probably have the exam written, but I am going to ask if you can then also make the exam on a computer, because I won't have time to go to the university and pick up the paper exams before Christmas. So I will see how I get them. If you have objections, I do have a painting. I don't know what's on the painting, but that's probably okay. It's no worries. So if you don't have any objections, or you have to make the exam on campus, maybe you can let me know so that I know how many people will take the exam on campus. Also, if you have extra time, usually because of dyslexia or some other issues, then that's taken into account as well automatically. So you just have a half an hour extra. Now, so what you have to do, so you have to show the room with your laptop before starting the exam, and your desk must be empty, but not the rest of the room. So as long as your desk is empty, so we can see that you have no dictionaries, papers, printouts, or whatever on your desk, then it's fine. Yeah, answers must be in English. So if you are Dutch and can't come up with an English word, it's okay to put the word in Dutch. But I have had problems in the past with students from abroad who did not consider it fair that they had to answer in English, and you could answer in English and Dutch. And you can have a desktop next to your laptop on your desk as long as it's off. Stays off. If you have any other questions about Proctorio, feel free to ask them. And maybe it's best if you also ask them on the discussion forum. You can just reply and ask other questions, and then I'll update the FAQ as needed with other information. So for me, most important was that you have to register for the exam. So if you don't register for the exam in time, you cannot take part in the exam period. So make sure you register for the exam. That's one. For me, also important is that you cannot go to the toilet during the exam. I think you can now. But you have to make a special request. So just go to the toilet beforehand. And you cannot use paper to take notes. No, you have to make notes on screen and not using paper, because there would be no way for us to check if there's anything else on that paper written. So I'm sorry about that, but you can just use the text. No, you cannot use Word. Specifically, you cannot have any other program on except for your browser with Proctorio. So you cannot use Word, but the exam is online. So it's in Canvas, and you see a text field where you have to write down your answer. So you can just make notes in the text field. And there's also a kind of notepad-like function in Proctorio, but I would advise against using that, because it's an extra application open and other things that can go wrong. I am not sure if 2 screens are allowed, so I don't know. So maybe it's in FAQ on the university's page. So I don't think so. Okay. Yeah, if Grammarly, I think if it's a plugin in Chrome, I think then that's okay. Although I am not really sure if that is if that works. Don't worry that much about your grammar though, because I'm not going to grade the exam on grammar. I'm just going to look at the answers. Okay. Any more very pressing questions? And if not, then we'll switch to the lecture. And again, you know, if you have any questions, I will just post it in the discussion board. I will answer them and I'll update the FAQ. But to conclude, I would not worry that much about it. So it's I understand the feeling of being watched because I have had that for the past 12 weeks. But in my last course, everything worked out pretty well. Okay, let's go to the lecture. I forgot if I pressed, yeah, I pressed record. So today's lecture will be about social media in organizations, and I will devote most of the attention to explaining one paper about social media, which explains what's called the building blocks of social media, but which explains 7 different functionalities of social media. It's already pretty old in social media terms, but I think it's still a very good paper. Well, very good paper is not really a very good paper, but the distinction they make in the 7 functionalities of social media, I think is pretty useful because it kind of, I think, nicely shows the relevance of social media for organizations. But I'll answer that a bit later, sorry. So, but first, before we can talk about the building blocks and the functionalities of social media, maybe it's best to first define social media. So, these are some older examples of social media, but of course there are many more. You know, you have WhatsApp, Skype, your phone, television, whatever, talking. So, if you can give a definition of social media, so what would for you be a key characteristic of social media? So if you think of social media, what would you think is, okay, that defines social media? So communication. Oh, yeah, maybe I'm going to write that down. Communication, connecting, sharing information, digital communication, sharing, interacting with others. Platform from communication, interaction, sharing different content. Could be sharing content. So if you look at what you think is social media, you have communication, there's connecting with others, there's sharing information, sharing content, digital communication, interacting, and all these are aspects of social media. But then if we think of, okay, what is exactly social media? Then sometimes it's a bit difficult still to define. So if we take this, for example, so would you say that WhatsApp is social media? Maybe I can do this with a poll. No, I can't. Then I have to make all the poll. I don't want to do that now. But does anyone have an opinion? Do you think that WhatsApp is a social media, or is WhatsApp not social media? Can use yes, no participants. Ah, yeah, then I have to show participants. Yes, because it's communication, not really. I would say that it is social media. You can communicate with others and share content, see availability. Good points. But then, if that is social media, if I use, yeah, it's a messenger. So if I use Skype to call someone else, would that then be social media? Yeah, so email. So then what makes social, so then what should be added to WhatsApp to make it social media? Many to many, it's a medium for social interaction. Likes and dislikes, that's a very good point. A group chat, followers, profiles, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so there is something, as you're sharing to, you cannot share anything but with the person you're talking to at the moment. Yeah, so if I kind of summarize that, go to here, back to here. So there is something which makes it, so there is a feed, a profile, and the like, and there is something which makes it many to many. So so it's also the likes and dislikes is also only possible because it's many to many interaction, because else only one person could like and dislike it, of course. So let's see if I have followers. Yeah, many to many, likes, dislike, followers, group chat. There is some groupiness to it. Yeah, and stories. Like you have with many. Oh, that's pretty interesting, stories, by the way. I will tell something more about that on the next slide. So if you look at social media, so it's, of course, so we consider it, you have to be able to communicate with it. It's digital, so it's based on internet technology. So it has many characteristics of just, basically regular communication online. But there is a kind of a feel to it that it has to be many to many. So it has to be open to more people than the people currently, or than people that may be currently chatting. And it has to have something that is a bit more permanent than the communication we have now. Often, well, this is recorded, of course, but then just video conferencing, which is gone after you say something. So social media, it has something, as is communication many to many, permanent. And if you look at the definition, the official definition of social media, this is exactly what we get. So there are basically two different types of definitions of social media. You have a broad definition of social media, which basically says, well, it's all mediated interaction. And if you look at the literal term social media, it's social media, so it's mediated interaction. But that's a bit too broad. So if you look at the narrow definition of social media, which I think explains a bit better what social media actually is. So the grayed out part is the technical definition. So it's based upon Web 2.0 technology. So we have had social media since, I think, it's been there for a long time, but it took off, let's say, in 2008, because then we got some new technologies, what we called Web 2.0, which made it possible to update content on the fly in your browser without refreshing the page completely. We call that Web 2.0. It's technologies like Ajax, which have allowed that, but that's from a technical perspective. So for us, it's more interesting to define social media, indeed, exactly what you say in terms of many to many. So it's to a certain extent public. So that doesn't mean it's public to everyone. So for example, in an organization, social media is public to maybe everyone in the organization or everyone in a certain project team. In your Instagram feed, if your Instagram is private, then everything you post is not public, but it's visible to, you know, the 600 followers or so you have. So what you post on social media is most of the time public and visible to more than just one person. But that also means, or coming with that, is that it's possible to form associations between people. And an association is, you know, just a follower on Instagram, a connection on LinkedIn, a friend on Facebook, but also a like from someone on your Instagram post. So the many-to-many aspect is very important for social media. The second one is what you said with sharing content and sharing information. Most interesting about that is the user-generated content. So for you and for us now, that may seem obvious that we are able to post things online. We are able to post pictures online, to make videos and post them online. But that wasn't always so obvious. You know, there was a time when only a large corporation would be able to do so. So they could print newspapers, make television programs. So it hasn't always been obvious that everyone can just post things to a general audience. So the user-generated content, the ability for people to share information, but also to react to others, so to like, dislike, comment on YouTube videos, have Reddit discussions. It's all user-generated content. So that's the second one. And I would say that the third one is that it's always, to a certain extent, persistent social media. Which I think, and then I come back to, I think, what Nick said a while ago, is that social media used to be persistent, period. So Snapchat wasn't there a couple of years ago. We didn't have Instagram stories. We didn't have Twitter, where your tweets would disappear after 24 hours, which we have since a couple of weeks. So social media used to be persistent. So everything you post online stays online. But now, of course, companies have realized that that's not always what people want. So ever since Snapchat, persistence is, well, social media applications play with persistence. So if you snap to someone, that's persistent for only a couple of seconds. If you share something on your Snapchat feed, or I don't know what it's called, Snapchat or Instagram stories, then it's persistent for only 24 hours, well, etc. So you can make things more or less persistent. But in general, social media is still defined as something that is persistent, that remains there for longer than face-to-face communication. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. If Snapchat is a social media, I would say no. But I sometimes have to give lectures to teens who are still in high school or even younger. And then when I ask them, what do you think is social media? They all say Snapchat, WhatsApp, or TikTok. But when I ask older people, they say, well, Snapchat and WhatsApp is not social media, but Wikipedia is. So the definition is kind of changing by generation. So I'd say Snapchat is kind of in between, because it has many-to-many characteristics. So you can post something on your Snapchat timeline, feed, whatever, and you can send a picture, and you know how it works. You can click groups, or you can click specific people who then receive your picture or message. So it is many-to-many, but it's a bit of a gray area. But this course is about organizations and how organizations use social media. And we see that in general, organizations like the persistence of social media. So if you think of if you consider social media that organizations use in general, it's most of the time it's persistent. So things like Yammer and Slack and Microsoft Teams, etc., all have ways to store what people say. And that's, of course, what organizations want, because if you look at social media from a innovation perspective, social media can be really helpful. So if you remember last week's lectures where we talked about virtual organizations, the way that organizations manage knowledge and innovation can be supported to a large extent by social media. So if you have an enterprise-wide social media, people can there share ideas, answer each other's questions, etc. And that's the main reason why social media and organization, well, there are two reasons. One, but the main reason why social media is so popular in organizations internally is because organizations hope that social media can be used by organizations internally to share ideas, to share knowledge, to innovate across the organization as a whole. Because social media connects people, it's pretty informal, and all the other characteristics. It's user-generated content, it's persistent, and those characteristics are very much valued by organizations. So that's the main reason why social media is used in organizations. The second reason that social media is used by organizations a lot is because of the external communication. Many customers, all customers are on Facebook or whatever. So organizations use social media to connect with their customers. So in my master course, we talk a lot about these characteristics of social media, and we take it a bit further and discuss more theoretically what is actually due to social media technology and what is due to our own psychology. And then we have a lot more philosophical discussion about what exactly is technology and what is human-based in technology. But we won't go there now because it takes weeks. And the course is called Social Media at Work. And it's in block 1 of the master. I'm going to answer your question, Emma, on the next slide. What I think is most interesting now is to take a quick look at how organizations can use social media. And therefore the main paper for this week, I think is the most interesting, and I think that's the paper you should know for the exam. Well, I already made the exam, so I'm pretty convinced that's the only paper you need for the exam to answer the other question. But they describe 7 different functions of social media, which are a bit more down to earth than the general user-generated content and many-to-many aspects. And if you look at these 7 building blocks of social media, these 7 functionalities, they all can, it's called the building blocks of social media, I think. All of these have, all of these different functionalities can be applied, used by, Kietsman, can be applied, used by organizations to help them with their business goals. So what you should be able to do in the exam is, for example, I can ask a question about what an organization wants, an organization's strategic goals, or some other idea an organization have, and then I ask, what type of social media would you think is most useful here? So you should be able to do that for the exam. And important as always for the exam is that if I, for example, would ask how could a company use TikTok or Instagram, to relate answers to questions like that to the theory. So if I ask a question, how would organization X use Instagram, to tie an answer like that to building blocks or to other theory you have learned in the course. Yeah, and then answer the question with one of the building blocks. So these ones are, I think, are well, not only relevant for the exam, but I think also relevant for organization, because what you can do as an organization, you can think about, okay, what do we want to achieve as an organization, and what different functionalities of social media do we need the most? And well, I'll give a couple of examples later on. But first, let me explain the building blocks. So there are 7, and all of them are still pretty broad, but also specific enough to discuss the use of them for organizations. So I start with identity. So because, as you said, social media is user-generated content, on many social media, we as consumers reveal ourselves to a certain extent. So we tweet, we post things on Instagram, we have a Facebook page, we leave all kinds of traces of ourselves online. Organizations use all this information, so they gather these traces of us online to try to come up with what we want. So organizations use that to create profiles of us, to invite them to sell us products in the end. So identity is the extent to which users reveal their identity and present themselves. So we do that as consumers, but organizations do that as well. So organizations also have to have a social media presence. So they have to have, a web page, a Facebook page, an Instagram account. And what you see more and more now, I think, is quite interesting, that organizations try to use social media to explain something about their culture and their identity as an organization itself. So you have more and more people who are called brand ambassadors and corporate influencers. So I think you saw this in the beginning of the Corona crisis a lot, that a lot of hospitals had people working in the hospital who also vlogged for the hospital and posted those vlogs online, so people could see what was happening and how the hospital dealt with all the sick people coming in. And I think that's a pretty interesting thing. Some of my colleagues also do research in, so how organizations use brand ambassadors or corporate influence to up their image. So identity basically means 2 things. Identity means that you as an organization can present yourself in a certain fashion, but also that consumers and us as individuals, we present ourselves in a certain fashion. I think, this is my main research area, so I can talk for hours and hours about this. So what I think is interesting is that is how people present themselves online, and how others form impressions of others online. So, for example, when you look at online dating, I'm pretty sure that many of you use or have used Tinder or a similar application. And if you create your own profile on Tinder, you choose the pictures in which you look the par, right? Which you look the best. So, you know, I have thousands of terrible pictures of me, but I'm sure that I would pick the one in which I look at least somewhat okay and post that on my Tinder profile. And then I post a picture of me on holiday, of me working out or whatever to build a certain image. But if you come across my profile, you want to have an honest impression of me. So you want to see who I actually am. And that's information given versus information of, and objective and subjective identifiers. So, so for example, if you could look at the bookcase behind me and see what kind of books I have, which is something I have less control about. Or you could look at my nonverbal behavior, or you could ask people what they think of me in order to build a more realistic impression of who I actually am. So information given is basically the information that I consciously present, so that organizations consciously present on their web pages, for example. Information given off is information that organizations and us have less control about. So my nonverbal behavior, but for organizations also what others say about the organization. So an information, so pictures you are tagged in is more like given off information. And those pictures also have more what we call warranting information. And warranting means that they have more value for us than other pictures. So a simple example is that if I say, you know, I'm a great teacher, no one will believe that. But if you hear from someone else, so, well, Alex is a great teacher, which you probably won't hear. But if you hear from someone else, Alex is a great teacher, then you would trust that information more. So that information has more warranting. And that's warranting information. But basically, though, that all relates to the tricks we use to find out who persons or who organizations really are online. And to get back to the previous question, yes, it really depends on the type of organizations, what social media you would use, and also what building blocks are more relevant. So for a lawyer, if a lawyer wants to build an image, you should probably not go on Instagram, on Snapchat. You should probably want to come across as serious. So you would probably want a web page and be present on LinkedIn. So it depends on the type of profession you're in, how important it is to come across in a certain fashion, and what social media you should use. Yeah, the other way around. So an objective, to be honest, that's less important. Objective and subjective identifiers is less important. There's also nothing about that in the exam. So an objective identifier is something that you cannot lie about. So my face. Now, for example, a subjective identifier is something that you have control over. So for example, on Facebook, I have to enter demographic information about myself, which is more or less objective. But I can also present myself in a certain way, which is more or less subjective. So that's objective and subjective. Okay, to give a couple of examples about what this implicates. So first of all, organizations can use that information that I give online, that I give off online to target me. So the post on the top left is a bit of an older post, but that's a post that I got on Facebook when I turned 35. Thanks. So I got an advertisement for anti-baldness shampoo or whatever when I turned 35. So thank you, Facebook. So that's a way, and that's how organizations use all the information that I give off online to target me with specific advertisements, and that's how Instagram does it as well, for example. Yeah, on Facebook you can act like somebody you're not. Yeah, absolutely, but I don't know if you know anyone who does, so why would you? And for organizations, it doesn't matter. So if I want to be, so I am a university teacher, but maybe I'm more interested in something completely different, then I create an anonymous Facebook profile, but still they can use that information of my other identity to target that identity. So it doesn't really matter. So they can still advertise to me, even if it's not the real me, because it's still a relevant advertisement, because it's still part of my identity. That we also deal with that in the master course. What is identity and who is the real you online. So organizations and organizations use your so information given off is also your browsing behaviors. Whatever you click on Amazon or on ball.com or whatever is used by those companies to create a profile. So this is an example of Amazon. So I click a lot. I order study books from Amazon, and now they recommend me with Complete Guide to Knowledge Management, Case Study Handbook, and other things based on the information I give off. So another example of building your identity, of course, is what you do online, and also how you present yourself. So on LinkedIn, I have a professional photo, an assistant professor, 20 years of experience, and blah, 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 see how good I am. And this is my Instagram page, in which I present myself differently. This is the person who sneezes like crazy. And I don't know her. So on different websites, you build your own. So you build your own presence. You build your own identity. So on LinkedIn, it's professional, and I get different advertisements on LinkedIn than I get on Instagram or whatever. Organizations themselves also have social networking sites in which people build an identity, a corporate identity. Yeah, it's also a bit about branding, but ask that after the call. That's not really relevant for this lecture. So companies build a, so now I already forgot what it was. Oh yeah, so companies also have social networking sites internally. So most larger companies, you have, you create your own profile in which you post your expertise, in which you can post on your wall, on your feed. And that way, people in organizations can also connect and share information. So building an identity is also for brand identity and online, but getting back to the last question, building your identity is also done internally by employees, and is also required by many organizations. So because it's easier to connect people to each other. So that's one, identity. The second one is sharing. So what you can do with social media, not only create your own profile, but you can also share information. And you can do that because it's user generated and because it's many to many. So you can share information, you can work together on content, you can write a business plan using Google Docs. So it allows all kinds of opportunities for co-creation and innovation. And we discussed it in several lectures. So you can use social media to co-create. You can use social media for brainstorming. You can use social media for crowdsourcing purposes, like the Lace example here again. So sharing also means working on content is the second important functionality. And if you look at what organizations do internally with social media, it's actually very, very similar to what you do with social media. So if you write your business plan, for this course, you create a WhatsApp group with your team. You create a Google Drive and a Google Doc in which you write the business plan, and then you work on the business plan together. You can use WhatsApp to ask questions. You can post comments on Google Doc with things that still need to be worked out. And that is very, very similar to how many people in organizations now work. Tools like Slack and Teams allow exactly that functionality. And you also see that now. So if you look at what Microsoft is doing, they are going towards a more web-based implementation of Office and most of the Microsoft software. So they continue to integrate Microsoft Office with Microsoft Teams and with Skype. So to make it one platform in which people in organizations can work together, can communicate, and can communicate with each other. So we recently started using it in our university. So we now have Office 365 in which you can work in the cloud. We can save stuff in the cloud. We can easily share stuff with others. It's integrated with Skype and Teams. And that's all not only related to sharing, but that's all related to allowing us to work together in the organization with whoever we want. Okay, so that's sharing. So, for example, Wikipedia is an example of sharing, and you see that a lot of larger corporations have a kind of internal wiki system. So not Wikipedia, but the Wikipedia is built on software which is called the Wiki platform. It's freely available, and you as an organization can install that software in your own organization and start building your own Wikipedia. And many organizations do so. So there are even some organizations who specifically use Wikipedia to build knowledge in your organization. So, for example, manuals about processes, or manuals about machines are put online, are put on Wikipedia. So when there's a new version coming, they can just update the page. So sharing is a pretty important aspect of social media, and is one of the main reasons that social media is loved by organizations. Okay, that's sharing. Marijn, the question about the courses about social media work is mostly internally related. We do talk a bit about branding, but mostly in relation to employee commitment and identity you have as an employee, but it's not externally. The main focus is internal communication and internal social media use, and not external. So we do have a brand and identity course, or something with branding and identity in a master as well. About Wikipedia, does that mean that everyone in the company could change the page? Yes. Specifically, if you go to Wikipedia now, you can edit a Wikipedia page. Everyone can do that. So that's the that's what you can do on Wikipedia. So how is sharing different from identity? Your identity is how you present yourself to others using social media. Sharing is creating content together on social media. So me creating my own profile on LinkedIn is identity. Me working together with others to create a document or make a Wikipedia page is sharing. But you're right that it overlaps. So there are 7 functionalities, but they are not completely separate because they're all part of social media and they overlap to a certain extent. The next one is conversations, and that of course is related to sharing as well. But you have to see those building blocks and those functionalities as functionalities you can focus on as organizations. So as organizations, you can focus on making sure that your employees create a profile. You can focus on working together. You can focus on communication, or you can focus on a couple of them. But those functionalities are, I think, mostly useful to for an organization to determine which of these are most important to them. I will have an example in a moment. So the third one is conversations. So that's the extent to which people communicate with each other. So this one is this is most easy. It's just social media allows people to communicate directly with each other through a whole lot of different channels, a whole lot of different social media. So it's communication with your colleagues using Yammer or Slack or Microsoft Teams, but it's also communication with customers through social media. So for example, through Facebook or through Instagram or through WhatsApp, if we consider WhatsApp social media. And it's pretty interesting, would also go a bit too far, but it's pretty interesting what happens if you communicate with each other using social media. So we are now communicating using video conferencing. So we have a pretty rich way of interacting. Well, at least you can see me and I can do some nonverbal behavior, but I cannot see you. I only have text-based chat. So for me, it's more difficult to understand you than it is for you to understand me because I have less information available about you. So I have no nonverbal cues available. You are pretty anonymous. So some people are identified by their name, but others may be identified here in Zoom by a nickname. And what you hear me talking, it's synchronous, but you writing in the text chat is asynchronous. And I think it's pretty interesting to observe how that affects the communication. So it makes the communication less efficient because it just takes more time to read the chat and to chat with each other than it is face-to-face or via video conferencing. On the other hand, again, if you have no nonverbal cues and if you're more anonymous, you can construct your identity more. So what you said before, you can create a whole new identity on Facebook. So you can use all those characteristics of computer-mediated communication, technology-mediated communication to your advantage. So that's also if you're a bachelor student, so that's also was I think discussed quite extensively in social aspects of new media, and is also something that will return in other courses. So how does computer-mediated communication affect interpersonal communication? Yeah, on the one hand, there's more. Well, it's pretty interesting. So it can be both. So there can be more noise in the video feed. So because I'm using my hands and you see my face, and my face is not really relevant for what I'm telling you. You may be distracted by the bookcase behind me. So on the one hand, there could be more noise in the video connection simply because there is a lot of information that you don't need. On the other hand, there can be more noise. It's not really, it's a kind of noise. So there's another type of noise in text-based chat. Because it's more difficult for me to exactly understand what you say and how you're saying it. For example, if you're annoyed, or if you're happy, or if you ask a genuine question, or if you are being cynical, that's more difficult. So it's more difficult to interpret. Yeah, so it's about the interpretation, and I think maybe you've all seen the picture that. So, for example, in how someone ends a WhatsApp conversation. So, so when someone, or when someone says hi. So if someone says hi like this, that's okay. But if someone says hi like this, that's weird. And if someone says okay, that's okay. But if someone says okay, that means that you're weird. So we have to do a lot more interpretation about the cues we receive online, especially in text-based chat, because we have less information about non-verbal information. So it's more difficult for us to understand what people actually mean. And that can have huge consequences for how people are able to interact socially. But in general, for organizations, the opportunities to communicate, so conversation aspect of social media, allows organizations to share knowledge. It allows viral marketing, to tap into what consumers are saying about your organization. But you can also use what people are saying about your organization to monitor, to monitor moods, to monitor the buzz around your organization. And you have lots of specialized software, Cousteau, for example, that organizations use to keep track of everything that people say about them on Twitter, on Facebook, and to monitor to monitor the image of your organization, to be able to reply very quickly to what people are saying about your organization. So that's conversations. So one fun example, and then we have a short break. What I think it's always pretty funny to observe how organizations are dealing with conversations about their organization. So I just mentioned Cousteau, and you have like many of these social media applications that allow you to keep track of what people are saying about you, but they also allow you to automatically post on social media on behalf of your organization. And many organizations do this. So they have all kinds of algorithms that if people post about a specific product, then they can reply to that message and say, oh, you can order this product here and here. But that can backfire. So this is kind of an older tweet. So Aurora was a school when there was a school shooting in the US a couple of years ago. But Aurora was also, I didn't know that, of course, but also a Kim Kardashian inspired name for a dress. So Celeb Boutique thought, oh, well, hey, Aurora is trending, so maybe it's the good time to post something about her Aurora dress online, which of course backfires a lot. And also you see those attempts of organizations to to communicate with their customers. So, for example, McDonald's had it's been a long time ago, but had used Twitter, and they introduced the hashtag McDonald's stories, and they invited people to communicate on Twitter their stories about McDonald's in the hope that people would react positively. But the one who the marketing manager who came up with that clearly didn't know how the internet works, because of course people are not going to do that. So the hashtag was hijacked, and people started using it to share their terrible stories about McDonald's. So ate a McFish and vomited 1 hour later. So people hijacked the hashtag and posted negative information about McDonald's. So it's kind of an art and a science combined, how you can deal with topics like this. So how you can communicate as an organization with your external environment is, I think, a very interesting topic. And we do have courses like WebCare in our master, which you learn about this a bit more. Okay, shall we have a break of 3 minutes and then get back at 10:05, because I'm going to the toilet. So I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Okay, let's continue with number 4, presence. Presence is the next functionality. It's something that may not be immediately obvious, but it is relevant for organizations. Well, you know that you in WhatsApp here, for example, you can share your location, and you can share your status on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, or in WhatsApp even. So social media applications, not all of them, but many social media applications allow you to give updates of where you are and of what you are currently doing. And this is also pretty interesting for organizations. So it allows organizations to know who is accessible when. So it allows organizations to know, to create shared agendas, to create shared workspaces. It allows location-based work, but it also allows location-based marketing, for example. So simply the ability to know who is where, when, and what people are doing is also something that is helped by social media and very relevant for organizations. And that's what so I don't know if you all have a LinkedIn account, but what LinkedIn is used a lot for. So simply to share updates about not only what people are doing, which is part of identity, but also who is doing what, when, and where. Where online currently, but in normal times, where. Now, who is a customer or employee? So it can be both. So for organizations, it's pretty useful to know what employees are working on at the moment, and to know shared agendas. So it may not be a part of what we generally consider social media, but it's helped by social media. So for example, some people in my organization have access to my calendar, and they can see my calendar in Outlook, and they can add appointments and see when I'm available for appointments. So that's an example of presence. But also in organizations, you can show what you're working on. So for example, Slack allows you to post a quick update of what you're doing. So currently teaching or currently investigating, blah, blah, blah. Which allows you to know what people are working on at the moment. So it's for employees, but it's also for customers. So many organizations also try to use some kind of location-based marketing to target customers in a specific area. And of course, you can do that with Facebook. So you can simply, target an advertisement on Facebook based on the location of certain people. But organizations who would like to do that as well, when you walk through a shopping mall or a city center, they want to give you advertisements of, oh, you're now currently walking past an H&M. Have you seen this and this item? But this is something that is still growing. So we had Foursquare a couple of years ago. I don't know if you still remember that, but it was quite popular. I think maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago or so. So suddenly we had to check in everywhere using Foursquare. But that has faded away a bit because we consider it a bit too much a privacy invasion. But nowadays we have Google Home and we have Google on our Google Assistants or Apple Assistants installed on our phones. So nowadays we share more and more information about our physical location online as well. So this is an example of Foursquare, and I also like the practical applications of presence as well. So it's not really social media anymore, but here you have in Amsterdam you have the car-to-go cars that you and you now also have the motorbikes, the Vespas, what's the company called? Was it Lyft or Felix? Yeah. So you have Felix, which is also a present-based application, and you can rent a scooter, and in this case on screen you can rent a car using an app. So in Felix and Car2Go is quite interesting. So also with Car2Go, you can just, you have an app in which you see where the cars are located. You can just take the car, drive with it, and park it anywhere you want. And similar to Felix, of course, which I think is quite an interesting new functionality of that we see more and more nowadays. So it may not be what we traditionally consider as social media, but it is really helped by at least the advent and the popularity of mobile phones and social media-based applications. Well, no, I would not consider those as social media. That they do have characteristics of social media. So the only reason that Uber and Airbnb can work is because it's also many-to-many. So many taxi drivers offering many customers a ride. But it's not a social media per se, but it has many characteristics of social media. You have reputation, likes and dislikes. It's many-to-many. It has communication functionalities. But I think, as with this example and with Uber as well, you see that kind of the distinction between social media and other applications blur, because you see that social media functionalities are built into non-media applications. So, for example, you need presence and you need reputation built into Uber. So you need those social media functionalities in order for Uber to function properly. And I think that will be a general trend. So that we see more and more applications that are not specifically social media applications, but that have social media-based functionalities built into them. Okay, number 5, relationships. Well, I can be very quick about this one as well. This is pretty easy. This is what you all also indicated, that in a big part of social media, it's the ability to establish connections between you and others. So you have followers on Twitter, you have followers on Instagram, friends, contacts, whatever. So those are relationships you have with people. And you can do analysis with that. So you can do a social network analysis. So you can create pictures like this, in which you create a network of who is talking to whom. And that's pretty interesting. So if I were an advertiser, I would really like to know who is like central in a network like that, which basically means who reaches a lot of other people. And then I would target those people with advertisements. That's why companies use social media influencers, because they are central in a specific network. This is an example of my own LinkedIn network from a couple of years ago. And this is an example of a social network analysis. And this kind of shows, so for example, this is one group of friends. These are all colleagues. These are colleagues from Tilburg University. And so this is an app that basically allows you to structure your LinkedIn contacts, or your LinkedIn contacts based on how well they are connected. And you can identify different groups. And you can imagine that companies would like this as well, to identify who knows who in an organization, to identify different groups of customers who like different types of products maybe. And organizations do this. So they use analysis based on relationships between people to target people for advertisements. But organizations also do it themselves. So what organizations want is, you call that social capital. So as an organization, you want to build relationship between your employees. So you want to connect employees who have relevant expertise to each other. You want to tie employees to each other throughout the company in order to strengthen commitment and identity and satisfaction in the organization. So you want to create social capital between the members of an organization, between organizations and their customers, between organizations and your suppliers, etc. So building connections is not only important for customers, but also for people working in organizations. And for the exam, you have to be able to, you have to say something about all these building blocks, yeah, or only the ones that are relevant, yeah, but you will only know which ones are relevant when you are asked the question in the exam. So you should be able to at least think of several of those building blocks in the exam and explain what they mean and how they are relevant for a certain organization. So 2 more to go. The 6th is reputation, and that's the liking and disliking. This is also pretty interesting, and this is also used a lot by organizations in communicating with their customers, but also used more and more for internal communication and for more professional communication. So reputation means the ability to like and dislike and to comment on other people's content in order to build, to show what you think about others, but also to build your own reputation. And I think I can best explain this with a bunch of examples. So because there are a lot of examples of reputation-based technologies, of reputation-based, I don't know what it's called, things built into social media applications. So let's start with the bottom left one. From 2 years ago, Famke Louise, number named slide, and you can assess the reputation of the number by looking at things like views, but also by looking at the like to dislike ratio, which for this one is pretty high. So almost 10K dislikes and 30K likes is, I think, a pretty bad division of likes and dislikes for a video. And you see that people have varying opinions about Famke Louise. So that's one way to assess reputation. So the bottom right one is an example of from eBay, and it's reputation about a seller on eBay, about 1975 Marco D, which has received 100% positive feedback, and a lot of positive assessments about the products he shipped. The top right is an example from LinkedIn, where people can comment on your, they can write recommendations, they can like or indicate the skills that you possess. And on the top left are the assessments of a certain dress on Zalando. And all of these are examples of reputation building devices that are built into social media applications that allow people to assess how well people function, how well products are liked, etc. And again, this may seem obvious to us now, but this is something that has really been made possible ever since we start using social media. Because ever since we start using social media, we have more and more ability to like and rate things ourselves. So we don't have to rely on experts or to our opinions in our immediate social circle, but we can Google reviews, we can see reviews on websites, etc. So reputation building is pretty important. And that's also sometimes important in organizations because, so look at the LinkedIn example, you also have that within organizations. So it allows for opportunities to identify experts and key customers for organizations. So that's reputation. Finally, groups. And again, this is basically, and again, there's overlap between the different functionalities, but the ability to create specific groups or communities that are then able to communicate with each other is also very important functionality of social media. So in organizations, I will explain that picture later on, but first I want to finish. I want to finish the lecture, and then after the lecture I will go back to the picture. So in organizations, people work in project teams. So in Microsoft Teams, you can create project teams. In Slack, you can create project teams. You can create communities for your customers, where customers can interact, or you can just keep track of the communities where customers interact about your product. So the ability to create groups, people working on a certain topic, is pretty important for social media as well. So those are the 7 building blocks. And I think it's pretty, and I think the most interesting part is that when you look at it from an organization perspective, you can pick the building blocks that are most relevant for you as an organization. So for example, if you have if you're an organization in which people, in which you want to share knowledge, in which you want people to share their ideas across the organization as a whole, then maybe these 3 building blocks, these may be the most relevant building blocks, because you want to be able people to share. In order for people to share, you have to create relationships between people. And if people share knowledge, it's probably important that people are able to indicate to what extent they value those ideas and that knowledge. So like, dislike, comment, etc. So these 3 building blocks, maybe also with conversations, are the most important for if you want to improve knowledge sharing. So, sorry, missed the layout here. If you want to build a customer community, then you may want to focus on other things. Then maybe you want your customers to create a profile, so you know what type of customer it is. So in order to get customer information. If you want to create a customer community, you also want to create a group for your customers where customers can interact and meet. And you also want to stimulate conversations. So if you want to build a customer community, maybe it's more relevant to focus on these 3 functionalities. So again, I think those 7 functionalities, I think are pretty useful for organizations to determine what you should focus on in a certain circumstance. And I think that's useful because then you can say something about organizations that goes beyond simply saying we should go on Facebook, because that's what happens a lot in organizations. So managers in organizations, they hear something about TikTok or Snapchat, and suddenly they say, yeah, we also have to do something with Snapchat. We also have to go on Snapchat and advertise. But you, as communication information scientist, you have to be able to say, no, first of all, if you look at the demographic of Snapchat, and then it may not suit the organization, but also if you look at the functionalities that Snapchat offers, they do or do not match the goals we have for our organization. So it's better to use in other social media. So these building blocks allow you to go beyond simply going with what is popular at a certain moment and really thinking about, okay, what do we need as an organization for this specific goal? So I think that's why they are important. yes, you do not need those articles for the exam. And except when I ask a question which is mention the 7 building blocks or something like that, there is no right or wrong answer. So if I would ask a question in which I would ask, okay, what do you consider the most important building blocks? There are multiple answers that are correct. It depends. So your grade will depend on your evaluation of and your argumentation for why these building blocks are important. So I want to spend 2 minutes in explaining a bit about customer relationship management systems, because I didn't get to it when I in the lecture on information systems. But I do think it's relevant to know what customer relationship management are and what you can use them for. Well, mostly what you can use them for. And I think that's important because many of you are interested in more like in the external communication with customers. And if that's what you will be doing for your work, you will use a customer relationship management system. So I want to take 5 minutes to explain a bit about customer relationship management systems. It's two slides. Yeah, 2 slides, 3 slides. So customer relationship management systems are systems in which you store information about your customers. But not only information about your current customers, also information about your potential customers. So information about people who you hope will buy. So for example, people who have logged into your website, people who have subscribed to your newsletter, but maybe also information about people you bought from third parties. There are a lot of organizations who just sell information about people. And maybe you can also store information in your CRM system about people who were customers but are no longer customers, to maybe target them again if you have a new product or service. So a CRM system is just like an ERP system. So it's a big database with a lot of information about customers. So about general customer information, about their interests, and about what they bought, etc. And organizations use that for 4 different types of things. So they use it for so they use it for customer acquisition. So that's easy. If you think of a customer relationship management system, you can use it to form relationships to gain new customers. So, you buy customer information from third parties with additional information, and you use the information to target new customers. So that's one, acquisition. Retention is making sure that customers keep buying products. So retention is, sending customers newsletters, updating social media, in order to make so giving them a discount for a product they've already bought once before. So to make sure that people keep buying existing products, so repeat purchases. So customer retention. So that's why you get bonus kortingen from the Albert Heijn. So that's why you get personalized discounts for products when you go to the supermarket. So that's for customer retention. That's all stored in a CRM system. So then there is customer extension. That is using a CRM system to make sure that people buy more stuff. That's the recommendations you see when you order from Amazon or whatever web store. People who have bought X may also be interested in Y. That's customer extension. that's using the information in the customer relationship management system to identify specific customer groups in order to target them with other advertisements. So Alex is a highly educated hipster who lives in Amsterdam. There are thousands of people who are exactly like me. They buy a certain product. So Alex, you must also like that product. Yeah, so it's like cross-selling and upselling, yes. Yeah. So that's customer extension. And you can only cross-sell or upsell if you have gathered a lot of information about your customers in a customer relationship management system. Because that allows you to draw connections between different customer groups, between the characteristics that customers have in common, etc. Yeah, and finally, customer selection. So you use customer relationship management systems to identify your most profitable customers. And it may sound weird, but organizations also use CRM systems to no longer target customers. You can use CRM system to determine your most profitable customers and then say, this customer is very profitable, so we should give them more attention, give them presents, give them discounts. And this customer has only bought something once and then had a lot of complaints, so we should try and motivate that customer to not buy from us anymore because it will cost us more than it will gain. So that's customer selection. So identifying groups of customers that may be most profitable, less profitable, or customers that you should get rid of. And there are a lot of different tools in customer relationship management that allow you to do that. So those systems are huge. So you can use them to send customers newsletters. So for marketing and service automation. You can use it for Salesforce automation. That basically means to identify leads. So algorithms in the system can recommend you customers that you should invest in now. So for example, that customer usually buys something in the autumn. Maybe you should target that customer now. And those systems can also be linked or integrated with call center and customer support systems. So and that's called operational CRM. So using the system for your day-to-day contact with customers. But those systems also have analytical purposes. So, if you do your pre-master now, you're probably fed up with all the statistics you have, and you have learned with all the regression models and ANOVAs, etc. Well, I have a huge disappointment for you if you're interested in marketing and customer relationship management. That's a huge part of customer relationship management. It's working with algorithms, working with statistics and statistical techniques to identify specific customer segments, to identify profitability, to be able to predict profitability, to predict when customers will buy something. So that's analytical customer relationship management system, customer relationship management. And that's also a huge part of customer relationship management. And that is called business intelligence. So gathering information about your organization, specifically about customers in this case, to be able to know what your customers are up to and how you should target them. And that's it. That's the most important things I wanted to do. That's the most important part I wanted to tell you about customer relationship management systems. Because I think that's pretty relevant for your future career and for other courses as well. So that's it for today. Next week, I will give the information about the database assignment. I will talk about implementation and give a bit more information about the exam. If you do have questions about Proctorio, about the exam, ask them in the meantime. Do it in a discussion board. That would be most helpful for your fellow students. And that's it for this week, except, so you can leave now if you want, but let me give the example. This example had to do with reputation. So it was about reputation and how you can grasp the reputation of your company by tapping into what your customers say about your company. But I had one example about what can also happen. So this is an example from Taco Bell. And this is someone who found it funny to lick the tacos and then sell them, and to make a video of it and post that video on YouTube. So very funny. Maybe you can skip, I'll upload a new version. So very funny, but it really cost Taco Bell a lot of damage. It cost them millions in turnover, because after this video went viral, so a lot of people liked it, of course, and so sales, I think sales from Taco Bell dropped, I think 25% in the weeks after this video went viral. And then it slowly recovered, of course, because people forget viral videos as quickly as they become viral. But it cost Taco Bell millions. And you have other examples of this as well. So you have examples of Domino's pizzas, you know, people throwing the pizza on the floor, or I think there was a video of someone who put cheese up their nose and then in a pizza, which is really funny when you're 16 and it's your first job when you work at Taco Bell or Domino's, but it's less funny for the one eating it and the organization itself. So it's an example of reputation, because this is a real challenge for organizations. So because you also have to train your employees about what they can and cannot, and what they should and should not do online. So of course it's obvious that you cannot post a video like this on YouTube, but can you be critical of your own organization online? So can I post something critical about my university or about my students on Twitter? Well, no, not about my students, maybe about my university. But there are all kinds of rules about how you must deal with social media as an employee. In order for the company to work well. So many companies have social media codes about what employees can and cannot do, but it's really kind of a challenge how organizations have to manage their reputation online. So that's why I showed this example. Okay, that's it for today. Already 10 minutes past. I will upload a new version of the slides with only the slides we discussed today. So, yeah, thanks. So that was it. So again, thank you very much for the lecture. Next week is the last lecture. So be sure to attend it, or at least watch it on YouTube. So thanks very much, and I'll see you next week.